Dr. Elena Ward, Episode 1. The shadow she never escaped, Dr. Elena Ward, had learned to live with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind. The kind that creeps into the corners of a room and clings to the walls like dust left behind after a storm. The kind that stays long after the last scream, the last explosion, the last heartbeat fades from memory. At 40 years old, Elena had become a master of functioning inside that silence. She could walk through hospital halls with unshakable composure, answer questions calmly, give orders with the sharpness of someone who had learned to trust instinct more than thought. She could mask exhaustion behind steady eyes, tuck grief beneath her uniform collar, and smile just enough to convince the world she was fine. But today, the silence felt different. It pressed harder against her chest. It coiled around her thoughts like a warning she couldn't decipher. She sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Outside her apartment window, the morning sun painted the sky in soft shades of amber. Traffic hummed below. Birds called out from a nearby rooftop garden. Life looked peaceful. Inside her, something felt undone. The knock on her door was gentle but firm. Elena didn't react at first. She rarely had visitors, and the ones who came usually called ahead. After the second knock, she rose slowly and opened the door. A young woman stood there, mid-30s, red hair tied back, backpack slung over one shoulder, wearing the recognizable blue badge of the Veteran Outreach Unit. Dr. Ward, the woman asked. Yes, the woman offered a small, warm smile. My name is Harper Quinn. I was asked to deliver something to you. Elena frowned. To me? Yes, Harper said gently. From the Department of Archives. They've recently released several classified documents tied to your last deployment. Some personal items were included. Elena froze. Personal items. Her pulse began to thrum in her ears. Harper reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed black envelope thicker than a letter, thinner than a file. Elena's name was printed across the front in bold ink. Not handwritten, official, cold. Harper stepped forward. Before I give you this, I need to confirm your identity. Elena nodded numbly and provided her ID. Harper scanned it, then returned it, and carefully placed the envelope into Elena's hands. If you need support reviewing the contents, our unit is available, Harper said softly. Some of these cases contain sensitive materials. What is this about? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Harper hesitated. It's about Iraq, your second deployment, and about Captain Adrian Cole. Elena's breath caught. For a moment, she thought she might collapse. Harper saw her expression and lowered her voice even further. If you'd like, I can stay while you open it. No, Elena managed. Thank you. I need to do this alone. Harper nodded with empathy only another veteran could carry. If you need anything, here's my card. She handed Elena a small card, then stepped back. Take care, Dr. Ward. When the door closed, the silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It pulsed with memory, with fear, with the past she had buried so deeply she had forgotten the shape of it. Elena sat slowly on her couch, the black envelope heavy in her hands. She traced the edges with her thumb, feeling the grooved texture of embossed lettering. Adrian, she whispered. She hadn't spoken his name in years. Not because she wanted to forget him, because remembering hurt too much. Her mind drifted back uninvited, uncontrollable, to the second year of her deployment. The sandstorms, the broken cries of wounded soldiers, the makeshift surgical tent where she had performed the hardest operations of her life. The nights she stayed awake, listening to mortar fire in the distance. The nights Adrian sat with her, softly tapping his fingers on a metal canteen while telling stories to distract her from the darkness. Stay awake, Ward, he had teased once, nudging her lightly with his shoulder. If you fall asleep on duty again, I'll personally report you to command. You wouldn't dare, she had said. He had smirked. Try me. They had laughed quietly. Quiet moments of warmth in a place built from fear. Her heart tightened. She drew a long breath and tore open the seal. Inside were 3 items: a photograph, a folded document, and a handwritten note addressed to her. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the note. Dr. Ward. This document was recovered from Field Unit 9 during post-conflict archival review. Due to its personal nature, it was cleared for release to you directly. Department of Veteran Case Management. She set the note aside. Her fingers hovered over the next page. The folded document. Slowly, she opened it. Her breath stopped. It was a mission debrief, one she had never seen. One that mentioned her name. One that described a failed extraction. Her eyes scanned the lines. Names she remembered. Names she had forgotten. Names she had buried. And there, Adrian Cole, listed as status missing in action, presumed KIA. Elena squeezed her eyes shut. Her heart twisted painfully. She turned to the final item, the photograph. It showed the 2 of them, Elena and Adrian, standing outside the surgical tent. She looked exhausted, but smiling. He stood beside her, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder. His expression was soft, almost warm. Someone had captured a moment she hadn't known mattered so much. Her vision blurred. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle the sob rising in her throat. Why now? She whispered to the empty room. Why bring him back now? But she knew the answer, because everything she had refused to face was finally demanding to be seen. Asterisk hours passed. Elena remained seated on the couch, staring at the items spread before her like pieces of a puzzle she had once refused to assemble. The photograph, the debrief, the note. Her mind spiraled through memories she thought she had locked away forever. The mission that went wrong. The last time she saw Adrian alive, his voice shouting her name through gunfire. The moment their unit was forced to split up, the radio cutting out, the endless, terrifying silence afterward. She had lived with that silence for years. Now it had broken open. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elena rose unsteadily to her feet and walked to her desk. She placed each item in a neat line, then sat down, breathing deeply. She knew what she needed to do. She needed to tell the truth, hers, Adrian's, the truth the silence had buried. She opened a blank document on her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling. Slowly, she typed the first sentence. I was there when the world ended for him, and I have lived every day since pretending it didn't end for me too. Her breath shook. She kept typing. The past poured out of her in waves, raw, unfiltered, painful. Every memory, every regret, every feeling she had denied herself. She wrote until tears blurred the screen. She wrote until her fingers ached. She wrote because stopping felt like suffocating. For the first time in 12 years, she let herself break open, not to fall apart, to finally begin healing. Episode 2, Echoes from the Desert. Elena Ward had always believed that the past was a closed door, a sealed room, a locked memory. But the black envelope shattered that illusion. By the time morning light crept into her apartment, she had not slept. Her eyes were red, her jaw stiff from holding, her emotions in place like fractured bones she refused to set. The photograph lay on her desk beside the classified mission report, its edges worn from where she had traced Adrian's face over and over again. She couldn't stop staring at him, at the version of herself beside him, at the shadow of a moment she had forgotten existed. She finally tore herself away only when her phone buzzed a message from Laura at the Veterans Center. Checking on you. If you need space to talk through what surfaced yesterday, I'm here. Elena typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted. Finally, she wrote, I'll come in today. Because she needed something solid to hold on to before the memories swallowed her whole. The Veterans Center was warm and bustling, the walls painted in calming earth tones, soft music filling the reception area. But the moment Elena walked in, she felt a sharp jolt, like stepping into a world she no longer belonged to. Laura appeared almost immediately. "Elena," she greeted gently, "you look exhausted." "I am," Elena said simply. Laura gestured toward her office. "Come, we'll sit." Inside, the room was softly lit, no harsh overheads, only a warm lamp in the corner. Shelves lined the walls, holding books, folded blankets, and small pieces of art donated by veterans whose healing looked different but felt the same. Elena sat slowly in the leather chair across from Laura's desk. Laura didn't start with questions. She waited. Finally, Elena exhaled shakily. "I received a file yesterday from Iraq." Laura's face softened. "Adrian," she nodded. "Do you want to tell me what was in it?" Elena swallowed. A mission debrief, a photograph, and confirmation that he didn't make it out of the extraction. A thick silence settled between them. Laura folded her hands. "You never received closure." "No," Elena whispered. "I ran from it." "Why?" Elena closed her eyes. She saw the surgical tent, the blood, the screaming, the fear. Adrian's hand gripping her shoulder before the mission, his voice telling her to keep her head down. His smile, a quiet promise they both pretended not to understand. "I was afraid that if I looked for answers, I would break beyond repair," Elena said. "So I chose silence." Laura nodded. "Silence feels safer, until it is." Elena laughed bitterly. "Silence becomes a prison." "Exactly," Laura replied softly. "And yesterday you opened the door, even if just a crack." Elena wiped her eyes. "I don't know how to handle this." "You don't have to handle it," Laura said. "You only have to feel it." That was the part Elena didn't want. Feeling hurt. Feeling meant remembering. Feeling meant reliving the night she lost him. After the session, Elena walked to the center's courtyard. It was quiet, lined with stones engraved with the names of fallen soldiers. She found herself reading each name, wondering how many stories were missing pieces, how many letters never made it home, how many truths remained buried in sand. The wind picked up, brushing against her hair. She closed her eyes, and suddenly she was back there. Iraq, 12 years ago. Nightfall, the base rumbling under the distant thud of artillery. The surgical tent suffocatingly hot, lanterns flickering with every tremor. "Ward, take over," Adrian said, stepping beside her as she worked over a wounded corporal. "I'm not finished," she snapped, sweat dripping down her brow. "You need a break. 10 minutes. Water. Now." She glared at him, but he didn't budge. His presence steadied her like nothing else could. When she finally stepped aside, her hands trembling from exhaustion, he took the scalpel and murmured, "You're running on fumes. Let me." She leaned against the supply crates, breathing deeply, watching him work with calm precision. "You ever going to admit you're human?" He teased without looking up. she replied. He smirked. Didn't think so. Later that night, they sat outside the tent, listening to the muffled chaos around them. I hate this, she whispered. I know, he said. I hate losing them. I know. I hate feeling powerless. Adrian turned to her, his eyes reflecting dim light. You're not powerless. You save people every day. You saved me more times than I can count. His voice was low, sincere. Elena looked away before the truth in his eyes became too much. She opened her eyes back in the courtyard. Her heart ached with the kind of pain that felt too big for her chest. She breathed, just breathed. That evening, she returned home and set the classified report on her desk. She forced herself to open it again. Page after page detailed the mission she had barely survived. Unit 9 had been ambushed. Extraction was delayed. Communication was lost. Captain Adrian Cole had volunteered to provide cover for the medics. Retreat, her safety, her life. She remembered him yelling through the gunfire, "Go, Ward." Don't look back. She had looked back anyway. He had smiled. That stupid, brave smile. Now she understood what that smile meant. It was a goodbye he didn't have time to say. Her vision blurred with tears. She whispered into the empty room, "You saved me, and I never saved you." The guilt crushed her. Later that night, unable to sit still, Elena took a walk through her neighborhood. Street lamps cast soft halos through misty air. People passed her laughing, living, carrying groceries, talking on phones. They looked so alive. She felt half ghost, half woman, half memory. But she kept walking. Past cafes, past families returning home, past the quiet hum of everyday life she had always stood outside of. At the far end of the block, she reached the waterfront. Waves lapped gently against the shore. The lights of the city shimmered across the dark surface. She sat on an empty bench, pressing her hands together. She whispered, "Adrian, what am I supposed to do with this?" The answer came not from memory or imagination, but from within. You live. Not because the past disappears, but because she owed herself the chance Adrian never got. She wiped her face, took a long breath, and murmured, "I'm still here." And maybe that means something. For the first time, she believed it, even if only barely. When she returned home, she placed the photograph in a frame, not to mourn him, but to honor him, to acknowledge the truth instead of burying it, to begin the long, painful, necessary journey back to herself. The silence didn't feel as heavy now. It felt like space. Space where healing might finally grow. Episode 3, The Weight of What Remains. The following morning arrived quietly, as if afraid to disturb the pieces of Elena Ward that had been shaken loose over the past 2 days. The world outside her window glowed. with a pale silver mist, sunlight softened by clouds, the kind of morning that felt suspended between stillness and change. Elena stood barefoot in her kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil. Her hands were steady today, not calm, but steady. A different kind of strength, one that came from finally acknowledging her own breaking point. The memories she had tried to bury were no longer whispering at her. They were speaking clearly, formally, like an unwelcome guest who had settled in her living room and refused to leave. She no longer ignored them. The photograph of her and Adrian sat on the counter beside her. She hadn't put it away after framing it the night before. She couldn't. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to look at his face, not the memory of him she'd held like a fading dream, but the real one, captured in full color. His eyes were bright, alive, focused. His expression held warmth she hadn't recognized back then, warmth she now knew was something deeper than simple camaraderie. She touched the frame. "I'm not running anymore," she whispered. The kettle clicked, and with that small sound, she began her day. At the Veterans Center, a strange energy buzzed through the halls, quiet laughter, soft voices, the shuffle of boots and sneakers across the tile floors. Elena walked toward Laura's office, but halfway down the hall she paused. A door she had never entered stood open. Inside, a group of veterans sat in a circle, talking softly. Some looked weary. Some looked hopeful. Some looked like shadows of themselves. A sign beside the door read, "Trauma Processing Group, Open Session." Her breath caught. She wasn't scheduled for this. She wasn't required to be here. But something inside her pulled her forward. Laura, who must have seen her from the inside, smiled gently and gestured her in. "Join us, if you'd like." Elena hesitated at the threshold, then stepped inside. The room fell quiet, not out of judgment, but out of respect. The others recognized her, not personally, but as one of them, one who had carried too much for too long in silence. She took a seat. The session continued. Veterans shared stories, fragments of pain shaped into words. A young mother described losing her best friend during a convoy attack. An older man spoke about nightmares that woke him every night at the same hour. A former medic described the guilt of choosing whom to save when supplies ran out. Elena listened. At first, listening felt like bearing weight she wasn't strong enough to hold. Then slowly it began to feel like sharing the weight. When the room grew quiet again, Laura looked at her. "Elena, would you like to speak today?" Silence stretched. Her throat tightened, but she nodded. "I lost someone," she began softly, her voice wavering. "I lost a piece of myself." Eyes around the circle softened. He was a captain, a good one. Stubborn, brave, reckless, sometimes. He made decisions that saved lives, including mine. Her breath shook. I never grieved him. I pretended it didn't hurt. I told myself it was part of the job. That loving anyone in a war zone was foolish. That soldiers died every day and we had to move on. A tear slipped down her cheek. I didn't move on. I froze. A woman across the circle whispered, "We all did." Elena swallowed hard. "I didn't know he cared for me," she said. "Not until I received a file 2 days ago. Not until I found out he volunteered to stay behind so I could make it to the extraction point." Her voice cracked. "He chose me, and I didn't even get to say goodbye." A man in the circle nodded knowingly. Survivor's guilt. Elena wiped her face, exhaling shakily. "I don't want to carry it anymore. I don't want silence to be the only thing I hear when I think of him." The room felt warmer now, filled with empathy instead of sorrow. Laura spoke gently. "Grief is not betrayal. Healing is not forgetting." Elena closed her eyes. For the first time, she believed that. After the session, Elena stepped outside into the courtyard. The wind carried the scent of spring, fresh earth, new growth, distant rain. She sat on a bench beneath a bare tree whose branches stretched upward like reaching hands. A small paper windmill spun on the memorial garden soil beside her, left by the child of a fallen soldier. Its gentle whirling brought a soft ache to her chest. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Harper. "Dr. Ward, more documents related to your request have been cleared. They can be picked up anytime." Elena stared at the phone. More documents, more truth. Part of her wanted to run. Part of her needed to know. She typed back, "I'll come now." The archives office was quieter than the Veterans Center, clinical, cold, lined with tall shelves full of sealed boxes and folders. Harper greeted her with a nod and motioned her toward a small table near the back. "There are 4 items this time," Harper explained. 2 reports, 1 personal effects file, and something we believe belongs to you directly. Elena frowned. "To me?" Harper nodded and slid a small metal box across the table. Elena's breath caught. She knew that box. It was a field kit, her field kit. The one she had lost during the second evacuation of Sector Delta. She had assumed it was destroyed. Harper continued. "It was found with a collection of personal belongings identified after the final sweep. It contains 1 item that might be difficult to see." Elena opened the lid. Inside was a cracked, dust-covered medical penlight, her penlight. But the breath-catching moment wasn't the penlight. It was the faint inscription scratched into the side. She tilted it toward the light, her eyes widened. It read, "Ward, don't stop saving them." Her knees nearly buckled. Adrian had written that. He must have found the penlight after she lost it in the chaos. He had written on it, kept it, protected it. A message across time, across war, across loss. Harper's voice softened. "Do you want a moment alone?" Elena nodded. Harper stepped away. Elena's hands trembled as she lifted the penlight to her chest. It felt warm, impossibly warm. A memory surged. The surgical tent. Adrian beside her. Her hands shaking after losing a patient. He had touched her shoulder gently. "You don't stop," he whispered. "Even when you're bone-deep exhausted. Even when it breaks you. Promise me you'll keep saving them." "I promise," she had murmured, barely holding herself together. He smiled soft, steady. "Good, because sometimes that's all we have." Back in the archive room, a tear slipped down Elena's cheek. He believed in her, even when she didn't, even when she couldn't. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice cracked, not out of pain this time, out of gratitude. When she returned home, she placed the penlight on her desk beside the framed photograph. The small metal object felt far heavier than its size, heavy with memory, meaning, and something she hadn't allowed herself to feel for 12 years. Connection. She sat down, breathing slowly. The silence didn't feel suffocating anymore. It felt like waiting, like the moment before dawn, like the world holding its breath. She picked up her journal and wrote, "I am ready to let him be more than a memory of pain. I am ready to let him be part of my healing." The words didn't make her cry. They made her smile, softly, quietly, like a beginning. Episode 4. The night she finally spoke, the night came quietly, like a visitor who knew the house well. Dr. Elena Ward stood in the center of her living room. The framed photograph of her and Adrian illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp. The penlight he had inscribed sat beside it, small, unassuming, and yet heavier than any medal or commendation she had ever received. 12 years. 12 years of silence. 12 years of pretending her heart hadn't been broken in the middle of a desert half a world away. Tonight, the silence was different. Not empty, not suffocating, expectant, as if it knew she was finally ready. She sat on the couch, legs curled beneath her, journal open in her lap. The room felt warm, safe, no shadows lurking like they used to, no sharp memories forcing themselves into her mind with violent clarity. Instead, the past drifted toward her like a tide returning home. She wrote slowly at first, then faster. Words spilled onto the page, filling line after line with truths she had never spoken aloud, truths she had denied even to herself. "I never said goodbye. I never let myself love you. I never let myself grieve you." Her pen paused. Her breath trembled. Then she wrote, "I'm ready to speak now. At 7:14 p.m., her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Hey, sis, you home? Can I stop by?" She hesitated, then typed back, "Yes," because she wasn't hiding anymore. 30 minutes later, Daniel arrived holding 2 takeout bags and wearing a nervous smile. "I brought Chinese," he said, "or the closest thing this city has to Chinese. I know you don't cook when you're thinking." Elena gave a soft, tired laugh. "Thanks." They sat at the table, eating quietly at first. Daniel kept looking at her, concern in his eyes, but also something else. Waiting. Finally, he asked, "So, what happened with the file you got?" Elena exhaled slowly, setting her chopsticks down. "It was about Adrian." Daniel nodded. "I figured. It confirmed everything I never wanted to face." He swallowed. "Do you want to talk about it?" She hesitated, but only for a moment. "Yes." And once she started, the words flowed like water breaking through a cracked dam. She told him everything. The photograph, the mission debrief, the penlight with Adrian's inscription, her memories in the surgical tent, her silence, her grief, her guilt. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't look away. When she finished, he reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "Elena, you didn't fail him," he said gently. "You loved him, even if you couldn't say it back then." Her throat tightened. "I'm not sure I knew how to love anyone then." "Maybe not," Daniel admitted, "but you do now." She blinked, stunned by the truth in his voice. "And Elena," he continued, squeezing her hand lightly, "it's okay to speak his name. It's okay to remember him. It's okay to feel everything you didn't let yourself feel." A single tear rolled down Elena's cheek. This time, she didn't hide it. Daniel pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly, letting her shake, letting her breathe. "It's okay," he murmured. "Let it out." And for the first time in over a decade, she let herself cry, not in secret, not in silence, but in the arms of someone who loved her and understood the shape of her pain. Later that night, after Daniel left, Elena stood on her balcony, overlooking the city. The night air was cool, carrying faint scents of rain and soft echoes of distant street noise. She wrapped her arms around herself and looked up at the sky. "Adrian," she whispered. His name didn't feel heavy this time. It felt right, necessary, alive. "You should have told me," she said softly. "But I understand why you didn't." The wind brushed her cheeks like a gentle hand. She imagined him standing beside her, not in the way ghosts haunt the living, but in the way memories keep the best parts of someone close. "I'm not angry," she continued. "I'm grateful for the truth, for the time we had, for what you left behind." A tear slipped down, but she didn't wipe it away. She let it fall. "Thank you for loving me," she whispered. Then, after a trembling pause, "and I loved you too. I just didn't know how to say it until now." The heaviness that had lived inside her for years lifted, just a little, but enough for her to breathe more freely. Enough for the night to feel less dark. Asterisk inside, she approached her desk and gathered the items the archives office had returned to her. The documents, the photograph, the penlight. She arranged them neatly, as though preparing a tribute. Then she opened her laptop. A blank document stared back at her. She began typing. "This is the story of a man I loved, a war that shaped us, and a silence that nearly destroyed me." Her fingers steadied, her breathing evened. Her heart, though aching, beat with a new rhythm, one that wasn't built from running or hiding or pretending. A rhythm built from truth, healing, and something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Asterisk hours passed. Her apartment grew quiet. Her eyes grew heavy. She saved the document and closed the laptop, letting the soft glow of the lamp guide her toward a quieter, safer version of rest. As she curled beneath her blanket, she whispered one final thing into the night, something fragile, something powerful, something she had carried for far too long without giving it breath. "I'm ready to live again." And for the first time in 12 years, she believed it. Episode 5, when healing finally spoke back. Morning sunlight filtered through Elena Ward's curtains like a soft hand brushing gently across her face. She blinked slowly, aware of an unfamiliar feeling blooming quietly inside her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Weightlessness, the kind that comes not from forgetting pain, but from finally allowing herself to feel it. She lay still for several long moments, staring at the ceiling as memories drifted through her mind, not sharp and piercing like they once were, but softened around the edges, as if grief itself was finally growing tired of haunting her. Adrian's face wasn't a wound today. It was a memory, a soft one, a warm one, and that terrified her almost as much as it comforted her, because healing meant letting go of the version of herself that had survived by holding tightly to silence. Healing meant stepping into a future she didn't recognize. Healing meant change. She inhaled deeply and whispered into the quiet apartment, "I'm still here." Her voice didn't shake this time. Downstairs, she made coffee and placed the framed photograph next to her cup, something she never would have allowed herself to do before. She studied it the way one studies a map of an old city, searching for familiar places, unmarked streets, hidden meanings. The Elena in the photo looked younger, exhausted, determined. The weight of war clung to her shoulders, yet she smiled just enough to suggest she hadn't lost everything. Beside her, Adrian stood like a quiet anchor, steady eyes, posture relaxed yet ready, a hint of a smile that had meant nothing to her at the time and everything to her now. She traced the outline of his silhouette. "Where were you going that day?" she whispered. "What were you thinking? Did you know then what I did?" She set the frame back down gently. "I wish I had known." But she wasn't drowning in the wish like she used to. She was acknowledging it, a step forward. At the Veterans Center, her footsteps felt lighter. She walked the hallway not like a visitor, but like someone who was, finally allowing herself to belong. Laura met her halfway down the corridor. "Elena," she greeted warmly. "Something about you looks different today." "Lighter?" Elena asked with a wry smile. "Yes," Laura said, "and more open." Elena hesitated. "It feels scary." "Of course," Laura said. "Healing always does." They walked into Laura's office, settling into the same chairs as always, but the energy in the room felt new. Less like therapy, more like two women sharing a moment of truth. "So," Laura said gently, "how was last night?" Elena exhaled. "Freeing, terrifying, necessary." She explained her talk with Daniel, how she had cried openly, how she had said Adrian's name aloud, how the world hadn't collapsed around her for doing so. Laura listened with a thoughtful expression. "And how do you feel now?" she asked. Elena paused, searching for the right words. "Like I've been underwater for years," she said finally, "and I just came up for air." Laura nodded. "That's exactly what grief feels like, a resurfacing." Elena swallowed. "But what if the air doesn't last? What if I fall under again?" "Then we help you surface again," Laura said simply. "Healing isn't linear, but the fact you surfaced at all, that's progress." Elena stared at her hands. "I'm afraid of losing this clarity." "You won't," Laura said, "because you earned it." A quiet strength settled into Elena's shoulders. "Earned, not given. Earned," she nodded slowly. "I want to keep going," she said. "Whatever this journey is, I'm not done." Laura smiled. "Good, because the next step might be the most important." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "Forgiveness." Her throat tightened. "Of Adrian." Laura shook her head softly. "Of yourself." Elena closed her eyes. That, she knew, was the hardest part. Later that day, Elena walked to the archive courtyard behind the Veterans Center. The sky above was overcast, casting the world in muted grays and soft whites. She sat on a weathered bench beneath an oak tree that had likely stood there longer than most of the soldiers memorialized in the stone plaques nearby. She placed the penlight in her lap. Adrian's message, "Don't stop saving THEM," seemed to pulse gently under the dull afternoon light. She held it tightly. "Did you know how much this would mean to me?" she whispered. "Did you write it hoping I'd find it someday?" A breeze brushed her cheek, startling her. For a moment, she let herself imagine it was an answer. "I'm trying," she said, "but sometimes I don't know if I deserve to heal." The silence shifted, not cold, not empty, receptive. "You saved so many lives," she continued. "Why couldn't I save yours?" A tear escaped. She didn't wipe it away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The breeze picked up slightly, leaves rustling overhead. She imagined the sound as a reminder of something Adrian had told her once after a long night of losing more soldiers than they saved. "You can't save everyone, Ward, but you save who you can, and you keep going." She clung to the memory, not like a wound, like a lifeline. That evening, Elena returned home and cooked for the first time in weeks. As the pan sizzled, she found herself humming. A song she didn't recognize, a tune her mind had stored somewhere and pulled out now without warning. When she plated her meal, she set it at the table beside Adrian's framed photo. Not because she was speaking to a ghost, because she was finally speaking to herself. "I'm trying," she said quietly, "and I think you'd be proud of me." She ate in silence, but the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt companioned, held. After dinner, she sat at her desk and opened the document she had started writing the night before. A memoir, a confession, a record of truth. She didn't know yet, but she wrote anyway. Words came softer tonight, still emotional, still heavy, but no longer clawing their way out of her. They flowed, steady and sure, like a river carving a new path. She wrote about her first deployment, her fears, her guilt, her love for Adrian, the kind she never said aloud, but always carried like a quiet pledge. She wrote until her fingers cramped, until her mind felt emptied and full at the same time, until she could breathe again. Before bed, she stepped onto the balcony. The city lights shimmered like scattered stars. She whispered into the night, "I forgive you." A pause, and "I'm trying to forgive myself." A breeze moved through her hair. She closed her eyes, letting it pass over her, letting it carry some part of her pain away. Tonight, she didn't feel broken. She didn't feel haunted. She felt becoming someone new, someone braver, someone softer, someone who was finally learning how to live after surviving for so long. And when she finally climbed into bed, the last thought she had before sleep claimed her was simple, quiet, and true. "I'm going to be okay." For the first time in 12 years, she believed herself. Episode 6. The dawn she finally chose. The dawn rose slowly, soft pink light spilling across the horizon, stretching itself over the city like a promise of something new, something earned, something long overdue. Dr. Elena Ward stood by her balcony window, arms folded gently across her chest, watching the sky shift from lavender to gold. 12 years she had avoided mornings like this, quiet ones, gentle ones, unburdened ones. Mornings where the world didn't demand a mask, didn't ask her to be invincible, didn't force her to outrun memories she didn't know how to hold. But today was different. Today, something inside her felt settled, not healed. Healing wasn't a destination, but aligned. Ready? She whispered into the soft morning, "Good morning, Adrian." For once, saying his name didn't feel like reopening an old wound. It felt like greeting a chapter she could finally close without shame. She dressed in clean scrubs, dark navy, simple, comfortable. She tied her hair back neatly, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She wanted to show up today as someone lighter, someone present, someone who wasn't afraid to step back into the world. Before leaving, she picked up the penlight Adrian had inscribed. "Ward, don't stop saving them." Her thumb brushed the etched letters. "I won't," she whispered. "And I'm finally saving myself too." She placed the penlight gently into her coat pocket and left the apartment. At the hospital, the familiar hum of machines and echo of voices filled the corridors. She walked with steady steps, still a soldier in spirit, but a softer kind now. A soldier no longer fighting the wrong battles inside herself. "Dr. Ward," a nurse greeted. "You look well rested." Elena smiled. "A real one. Thank you. It's been a long night. A good night." They exchanged knowing glances, one of those wordless connections between people who had seen too much and still chose to get up each morning anyway. Her first patient of the day was a teenage boy recovering from surgery after an accident. His mother hovered anxiously near the hospital bed. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked. "Yes," Elena said warmly. "He's strong. He just needs time and patience. Healing doesn't follow a straight path." The mother nodded, visibly relieved. Elena placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She meant every word she said, and for the first time, she said them to herself as well. During her lunch break, she walked outside to the courtyard garden behind the hospital, a place she had always avoided. It was too quiet, too reflective, too close to the kind of silence that once crushed her. But today, she sat on a bench beneath the blooming dogwood tree. White petals floated around her like fragments of a piece she never believed she'd find. She closed her eyes. The sound of the wind through the branches reminded her of sandstorms, of desert nights, of whispered jokes and stolen moments of warmth in a place built from cruelty. She expected the memory to sting. It didn't. Instead, it wrapped around her gently. A memory softened, not erased. A memory she could hold without drowning. She opened her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered to the wind. not just to Adrian, to herself, to the version of her who had survived for 12 years without breaking completely. At the Veterans Center that afternoon, Laura greeted her with wide eyes. "Elena, something's different about you." "I feel lighter," Elena said simply. Laura studied her a moment longer. "Tell me." So she did. She told her about the dawn, the penlight, the moment with her patient, the quiet acceptance blooming slowly inside her. Laura's eyes softened. "That's not just healing, Elena. That's transformation." Elena laughed softly. "It feels terrifying." "It should," Laura said. "Transformation always is." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable silence, not the painful kind that once followed her like a shadow. Finally, Laura asked, "What do you want the next chapter of your life to look like?" Elena inhaled deeply. For years, she never let herself imagine a future, because imagining meant losing control. Imagining meant risking hope. Imagining meant admitting she wanted more than survival. But today, she allowed herself to want. "I want to teach," she said. "I want to train new medics. I want to help soldiers who come home broken. I want to write Adrian's story not as a tragedy, but as the truth." Laura smiled. "That sounds like purpose." "It feels like freedom," Elena whispered. That evening, Elena returned home and opened her laptop. The document she had been writing waited for her, hundreds of words already, each carrying a piece of her, a piece of him, a piece of everything she had lived through. She added a new title page, "The Light We Left Behind," a story of war, love, loss, and becoming whole. Her fingers shook only slightly as she typed. She wrote for an hour, then 2. She poured the truth onto the page, not just the pain, but the tenderness, the humanity, the quiet moments no report could ever capture. Every sentence was a stitch, every paragraph a step, every memory a release. And when she finally leaned back in her chair, she wasn't exhausted. She was alive, fully, deeply, consciously alive. Before bed, she stepped onto the balcony again. The city shimmered beneath her. Somewhere, a siren wailed softly. Somewhere, laughter drifted through an open window. The world felt vast and small at the same time. She looked up at the sky, dark, starless, but full of quiet promise. "Adrian," she whispered, "I'm moving forward." A pause, not to leave him behind, to carry him differently, to honor him without burying herself under the weight of his memory. "I'll live," she said, "for both of us, but mostly for me." She exhaled slowly. For the first time in 12 years, the breath didn't tremble. It steadied, aligned, became something new. She turned off the balcony light and walked toward her bed, toward tomorrow, toward the unknown, toward the life she had finally chosen. Elena Ward, soldier, doctor, Survivor closed her eyes, and for once she slept without nightmares and woke